Hello everyone, this is part 48 of What If Naruto was in Anbu at 6, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. He never knew a simple door could be imposing. He felt as though he was staring into the great maw of some impossibly large beast, and the fear that gripped his sea was so unexpected and powerful it nearly stole his breath. Contrary to popular belief, he was no stranger to fear. Every warrior knew fear, they had to know it, breathe it, gain knowledge from it, in order to learn how to face and defeat it. But this was different. This was not the fear that was a prelude to the sharp sting of adrenaline that drove its way through one's stomach like a spike of jagged, rust-crusted metal. This sensation was 100 times worse. The other was fast, it came and went like a blow to the head, leaving only physical discomfort as the aftermath of its arrival. This was sensation that made his gut churn with nausea, dried his tea until he had to swallow to ease the feeling, and all he could do was clench his fist as it hovered over the handle as his mind turned his fear of what lay beyond this doorway over and over around his skull. What would he see there? Just how far had her body been withered by the sickness? His heart palpitated in his sea with surprising force, making him stand within the hallway for a moment longer as he willed his body's reactions into submission. With a deep breath, he finally opened the door. The room's scent stung his nostrils, filling his senses with the acrid stench of antiseptics and chemicals. His gaze swept over the room. Only two Hyugas occupied it, one sat on a chair, the other in the bed next to it. Hanabi was the first to look up from where she'd been hunched over, puffed eyes staring listlessly at him for a moment, barely recognizing him out of his robes or armor. Water glistened the surface of those silver orbs, barely held in check. Finally he saw her suck in a breath, spine straightening in her seat, bringing Hinata's closed eyes to open with the disturbance, scanning the room with a slow lethargy of sickness before her sight finally met his own. And then she did something that drew his surprise. She smiled. Too sick to move, with skin far too pale, body far too thin, shivering with cold, and she was smiling at him. Slowly, he broke his gaze away from her own, turning his eyes to the, it would seem, imminent future Hyuga matriarch, and spoke, his voice as even and toneless as it had always been, belying nothing of what he felt beneath the surface of his leave. The young Hanabi looked as though he had smacked her for a moment, before outrage quickly overtook her initial surprise. On the cusp of protesting, he saw her mouth snap shut, no doubt due to the fact that her mind had just caught up with her voice before she could give it voice, remembering who she was about to talk to. But for his own part, Naruto held no patience for her reluctance as she looked from Hinata to the door, torn between her affections for her sister and her fear of him. Now, he growled, emphasizing the word as he stepped further into the room, watching as she, finally, tore herself away from Hinata's bedside. Marching across the room and exiting through the door behind him. Naruto barely spared her a glance as she left, hearing the door click shut, before he finished closing the distance between himself and his once-upon-a-time teammate. Standing at her bedside, he watched the young woman's eyes swivel up to him, blinking slowly with lines of exhaustion drawing creases and wrinkles that were not there the last time he'd seen her. Her wan skin seemed to be hanging off her bones, her face was pale, sweat matted her previously full and well-kept tresses into a haphazard tangle that spread over her forehead and the sheets of the bed like trails of dark ink. He struggled to find something to say, anything. He, for once in his life, was actively seeking words of comfort. Something he could give to her, say to her in this, when she needed it of him. But his voice was empty and his mind hollow. She had to be the one to speak. "I'm glad you're all right," she breathed, voice raspy with lack of use and debilitating sickness. His mouth was a grim line on his face as he stared at her, the small, contented little smile he could see on her face, as perplexing to him as the fear he'd felt when he'd been standing outside the doorway. There was a rustle over the sheet, and his blue eyes were drawn to it, finding her too thin hand weakly reaching for his own. Grasping it with fingers that were too cold, holding on with a grip that was straining to keep itself there. This was not right. Before he'd realized it, he found himself shaking his head, and the words leaving his mouth before he knew he'd said anything. "You cannot hear Hinata. We are too close now." The new world is almost within our grasp. It doesn't matter, she answered, almost struggling to put out the words, though the smile never left her lips. Doesn't look like I'll get to see it, Naruto. It was one of the few times he'd ever felt powerless in his entire life. This was not right. You cannot, he found himself repeating, as though it would change anything. That little smile just got a bit wider. You can't control everything, Naruto. Couldn't control everything. He controlled more than half a continent, he could marshal legions of troops, raise entire states, bankrupt cities on a mere whim if he so chose. And here he was unable to stop, a simple disease. She should not here, like this. If she should it should be in a battlefield, meeting an opponent blade on blade, skill versus skill until one proved the better, or as an old woman at peace in her home. Not by poison. Naruto. Her weak voice forced him to focus, brought him back from thoughts that were quickly reigniting the flame of an anger that had no target. I need you to do something for me. He stayed quiet, but she knew he was listening, he always did. Take care of Hanabi for me. You'll be able to do it yourself. He was lying, he knew he was lying. Naruto, please, she gasped, the look in her eyes imploring him to understand. And he knew that he needed to force himself to accept what his mind already knew was truth. She was going to and there was nothing he could do to stop it. She's young, he heard her speak. She'll need help. She'll need your help. The tenuous grip on his hand got just a little tighter, squeezing as much as she could. Please. Her voice was so weak, her grip so fragile. If you're willing to entrust her to me, he finally answered at length, then I am willing to accept the responsibility. He saw her shoulders sag with relief and that smile became just a bit more peaceful. This time, it was he that tightened his grip over her hand. It was not supposed to be like this, he said, and the logical side of his mind knew that this was mere sentiment speaking, foolish feelings that should have never been allowed purchase over his mind. They all one day, and most were not glorious, or peaceful, they were cold, alone, away from home in fear and in pain. What did it matter that she should today, or tomorrow, or even 100 years from now? The world would keep spinning. He would still be here. And his mission was not finished. It meant nothing. It was supposed to mean nothing. Standing there at her side, forcing himself to keep her fingers in his own, as though it would make her stay here. As though it would stay her spirit from leaving this body for just a few more moments. It was with a startled jerk that Hinata realized she was being lifted off the bed, and with more reflex than any real strength she wrapped her arms around his her head falling against his shoulder as she was raised. Unlike most people, Shikamaru could tolerate administrative duty, he enjoyed it in fact, hours of doing little more than reading a line or two, finding where the designated paperwork was supposed to go, and then having a clone put it there. It was a quick, simple and easy task that really didn't require much effort physically or mentally, so he frequently swapped with other ninjas for their hours. Since Suna had such few ninja in comparison to most villages, every one of those needed to train themselves up regularly, so administrative tasks were swapped in shifts of weeks instead of having a permanent administrative branch, a permanent medical branch and so on and so forth. Everyone needed to be ready to help in any task the village might need of them at any given time. Quality over quantity, one would say. It was something that worked out for the best for everyone really. He was as strong as he needed to be, probably as strong as he was going to get, this let others work on their skills, their area of expertise, while he had hours of free time to work on his area of expertise. His brain. Every day he spent in here he was marking down battle plans, tactics, strategies, running the numbers. How many supplies they had, how long they would last, how many could Konoha throw against them given estimated losses they'd suffered, where could they hit from, what could be their possible supply routes, how many people Suna had at its immediate disposal as combat ready, how many were injured, how long their supplies would last, how many more supplies could they gather and from where, what were the best places for them to effectively defend the city and outlying deserts from. And about 100 other factors commanders needed to know. Thousands of numbers, hundreds of calculations. Because Konoha would come here swinging hard and he would make sure that he'd covered every angle, everything the militant bastards would throw at them. Suna may be destroyed, but before they went down they would be the Demon King's empire white. He would do his best to make damn sure of that. And because he would do his best, It was why he found himself climbing the stairs to the Kazekige's office a little after midnight, reports and results in hand, ready to leave them on the desk to make sure Gara, or whoever the hell, read them first thing when they arrived tomorrow morning. After that he could head back down, throw on his coat, brave the near-freezing temperature of what was left of the night, get home and get some sleep. Reaching the door, he opened it, not even bothering to knock. It was pitch black inside, much like he expected, with only the hint of light sneaking in from the cracks of the balcony door offering only the vaguest outline of the desk for him to put with his memory. He stepped forward into the dark room, too lazy to fumble around for the light switch. He stepped carefully around the chairs that were resting in front of the desk, placing the papers in the center of it and placed the paperweight over them before he moved to turn back around towards the exit. Answer, it was with complete surprise that the shadow user felt his foot snag on something as he turned, too soft to be a leg of the chair and too large to be some uneven floorboard, sending him nearly stumbling headfirst into the still open door. What the hell? He yelled, grabbing onto the knob before tossing the doorway open even wider, letting a bit more light into the pitch black room, allowing his eyes the sight of someone sitting on the long chair, one leg held out, the one he tripped over. The person was hunched, a bottle of what Shikamaru didn't even need to deduce was sake in one hand. He would have asked what the hell he or she was doing in the Kazekige's office of all places to get drunk, but discovering that the mop of hair on the intruder's head was a bright red, he checked off the question. And just like that last one, about a dozen other stupid questions were categorically stricken from the line-up as he prioritized what he should ask first. He observed that Gara's clothes were damaged, very damaged, as if he'd been in a fight recently, knowing that nothing of the sort had happened since his return to Suna 6 or 7 hours ago. Shikamaru could safely deduce that he'd not cleaned himself up yet. Something that he'd never allow unless the situation called for it. Gara was, in no small part due to Temari's influence, very clean. He also never, ever drank. In the 10-some-odd years that he'd known Gara, Shikamaru had never once seen him with a bottle in his hands. He could understand really, harboring a demon powerful enough to sink the entire village beneath the sands under their feet did not really give one much prerogative to risk losing the reign of self-control. The last thing one would want would be to wake up with a hangover only to realize half the village was gone in a drunken rage. And lastly, he realized as he switched on the light, Gara was clutching a scroll very tightly in his free hand, so tight Shikamaru was sure his fingers would be aching in a few more minutes if they weren't already. Looking at it a bit closer, given the fact that it was woven together with wood that was not native to Suna, he would take a leap here and say it was from Kumo, and only two people had access to information that could get Gara to react like this from Kumo that he knew of, so it was either from Zhuge or from Yue Ying. And if it was from Ying, it was most likely pertaining to or from Zhuge anyway. He opened his mouth, ready to speak when, "I can't get drunk." His mouth snapped shut, a confused look crossing his thin features before he eloquently responded with a, "What?" The liquid in the bottle churned and sloshed as Gara lifted it to emphasize, one lip curling back in a mixture of disgust and anger. "I drank 3 of these," he clarified. "I don't feel a damn thing." It was quiet only for half a second before the Kazekage stood, exploding into sudden motion that surprised Shikamaru before he saw the man send the sake bottle hurtling through the air, against the opposite wall with a magnificent crash, shards of glass with droplets of sticky, clear alcohol flying everywhere. Without pausing, Gara picked up one of the chairs Shikamaru had been careful to avoid, and launched it out the balcony, splinters of wood and glass following after it as it through, leaving a gaping hole where the freezing Suna night air entered through with gusto. Though surprised, Shikamaru was able to easily keep his calm, eyes following Gara's movements and the path of destruction more thrown objects were causing. So far the Kazekage hadn't picked up his desk or the papers he'd left there, so Shikamaru didn't yet deign it necessary to use his Kajimane. Instead he decided to speak, raising his voice to carry over the commotion. "Mind explaining what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Gara nearly hissed, not even turning to look at him. "I'm just busting up my office." With a flick of his wrist, a column of sand lifted the long chair he'd been sitting in, throwing it through the wall, and the one-time Konoha nin could physically notice the room getting much colder now. "I can see that," Shikamaru commented, more than happy to be close to the door. "We seem to be doing a good enough job of thoroughly screwing each other over on our own. Maybe if we finish the job we'll be left in peace." And now it was time to intervene. He was getting too close to that desk for comfort. The abrupt stiffness in all his limbs was easy for him to place, and made his racing heart and harsh breathing more than apparent to him. Shikamaru was more than a little intrigued by what that last statement implied, but now was not the right time to address it. He'd find out later, if not from Gaara, then possibly from Kankuro. Feel better now? He asked, then quickly continued, not waiting for an answer. Forget that, because it doesn't matter what you answer, because you've got option A or option B. Either you feel better and you decide to stop thrashing your office, or you don't feel better, in which case I point out that thrashing your office isn't helping. Now, I'd ask you what exactly happened to get you like this, but again, there's option A or option B. Option A is that I do not have the clearance to know, or option B, I do have the clearance to know, in which case I'll find out when you give the debrief to the rest of the Junins. So it's completely irrelevant to ask. The shadow user cleared his tea. Now to get right down to it, people get drunk for one of two reasons: either they're at a party, or B, they want to escape something. You're definitely not at a party, which leaves just option B. And knowing you, you've faced conflict, you've faced loss, you've faced hardships and everything the world has thrown at you so far without picking up the drink, so that leads me to believe none of these could have pushed you to it, so that leaves only two things I can think of in the span of 5 minutes. And those two things are fear and truth. So what I am going to ask you, Gaara, is, which one are you trying to escape? Still held in the shadow user's Kijmane, the Kazekage stayed very quiet. For a brief window of eternity the two stood there, with Shikamaru waiting patiently until Gaara finally decided to answer. Would you be surprised if I said both? Shikamaru shrugged. Not really. We haven't exactly had the best of luck recently. If you want to know the truth, the only thing that surprises me is that you think you need alcohol. You wouldn't understand. Maybe not. The Nara admitted. God knows I probably couldn't have handled half the crap you've had to deal with nearly as well as you. But so far, Gaara, what I do know is that you're one of the only things that's keeping this village, Kumo's refugees included, standing. And as much pressure as that must put on you, that, he gestured towards the wall where he'd thrown his bottle not 10 seconds earlier, is not something you need to bear it. His piece said. The Nara retracted his shadow, turning and walking down the hallway, leaving Gaara alone now in his half-destroyed office. Gaara pulled the scroll up towards his face, his thumb passing over the seal of the rakeage once before setting it on his desk. He would read it, he told himself, tomorrow. Tomorrow, he would read it, he would shoulder the burden of responsibility again, take it up with as much dignity and perseverance as he had left. For what was left of the night, though, he would take for himself. For what was left of the night, he would be the coward. He would go to his home and try to hide from the world and all of its messed up problems. He would seek to ignore everything as much as he could. He would allow himself to be selfish, allow himself to buckle under the weight. Only one night, because he knew the world would give him nothing else. And he would let himself take nothing more. The fire snapped and cracked in the air between them. Over their heads, a shelter, bound together with branches, twigs and leaves, far sturdier than anything she could have put together with the limited supplies she had, shielded them from the worst of the wind and rain. She found that the warmth of the flames was like a soothing balm over her cold skin, and it was only the wish to keep a comfortable level of distance from her current host's infamous blade that she didn't scoot closer to the welcome source of heat. Exile ha. She was surprised to hear him speak. It had been at least an hour since he'd cornered her in the forest, and she'd told him just why she held half of a demon in her. He'd brought her here at the point of his sword and hadn't said a word since. As she looked at him now, that little smile was on his face again. He pulled the spit from the ground to turn the meat before it back into its slanted position. Playing ninja, she heard him comment, more to himself than to her. You're lucky. I know a lot of cages that would have just KO you outright. I would have. She pulled her knees closer to her sea, wrapping her arms around him as she rested her forehead where her knees met her thighs. What does it matter? She asked. Unless you're going to tell me what exactly you plan on doing to me, I'm not interested in what you have to say or your opinion on what happened. Do. He smiled some more, scoffing. I ain't gonna do a damn thing with ya. He made a vague gesture outside. In case you didn't notice, Akatsuki is finished, girl. I ain't got no beef with you, so I don't need to do anything with you. Tomorrow morning we'll both go our separate ways. He smiled a little bit wider, a twinkle in his beady eyes giving her the feeling as though he knew something she didn't. I'm sure we'll meet again somewhere down the line. That's it, she asked. You're not angry. You don't want revenge. Revenge. He almost looked as though he was struggling not to laugh. For what? Those guys I worked with. It's just business, girl. I had no love gained or lost by UK them. They were the means for me to achieve an end, and little more. What end was that? Live long enough and I might tell you one day. Again, she caught that twinkle in his eye, that little expression that was half smug, half mocking. Turning the meat around again, the Kirin allowed the silence to stretch on for a moment before he broke it again. You thought of what you're gonna do? She didn't answer. Reaching over, he yanked out a half-cooked chunk of meat from the spit, popping it in his mouth, rows of razor-sharp teeth tearing away at it as he spoke. Do you even have an idea? No, she answered, almost, but not quite a snap. No, I don't. I have no idea what I'm going to do, I have no idea. For this whole country there are only 2 governments and in one, the Angel of Suna has a bounty in the bingo book high enough to get every missing nin, Anbu and Hunter on my trail the moment anyone gets a confirmed sighting of me, and in the other, virtually the entire Anbu Corps will now have orders to K me on sight. I have nowhere to go and I have nothing left to turn to. So forgive me if I seem to be thinking too slow for your tastes. Kisum shrugged nonplussed towards her biting tone. If it's just having a place you're worried about, go to your brother. She moved to speak, her expression a prelude to just what she thought of his suggestion when he continued, stopping her. Think about it, he clarified. You saved him back there, so he knows it's unlikely you'll try to him. And reporting that you, the Angel of Suna, has defected will. He paused, looking for a word that could fit for his description. It won't destroy Suna's morale, it'll freaking rape it. He'll knock the sand village over like a strong wind to a house of cards. No, she answered simply, her tone of voice alone making it clear to the former Kirin that she would not be moved in this. I can't do that. He shrugged his shoulders, pulling his cloak off himself before reaching forward for the meat. Tearing off another large chunk from the spit, he tossed it towards the exiled Jinchuriki, who caught it with a hiss as the hot meat burned her hands before she set it down on her knee for lack of a better place, looking around frantically for something else she could use before eventually settling along the lower edges of her traveler's cloak. Alright, so let me ask you this then. What do you want to do? Why are you even interested in this? Do you see any other way to K-time around here? He asked, taking a huge bite of meat she now knew was far too salty for her tastes, but was the only thing edible for miles. The fish man laid down on his back, one hand holding the meat above his face where he lowered it to take periodic bites as he waited for her answer. And it was with a creeping realization that Akina found herself unable to answer. What did she want to do? She didn't know anymore. Stop Konoha, protect Suna, help Naruto. Which was more important? Which was still possible? Had any of them ever been possible? Kisum smiled again. I'd think on that one girl. He said, taking the last mouthful of his meal before rolling over, his back facing her, though she doubted it would make much of a difference. I'll want that answer in the morning. And with that, the Kirin left her alone with her own thoughts in the tiny hovel that was their shelter, with the rain beating harshly against the leaves and twigs, the wind howling around them. It would be hours before she would drift into a fitful, restless sleep. The wind is cold against them, he feels her shiver in his arms, and he shrugs his shoulders to move the cloak over her a little bit more. He continues up the winding path, rocks and dirt crunching beneath his boots as he crouches and weaves himself through the spindly branches and gnarled roots. Where are you taking me? She asks, there's no fear in her voice, only curiosity. To a place where you can see. See what? Her voice is breathy this time, as though she's about to fall asleep. He looks down to her, a pang of worry creasing his brow, her eyes are at half-mast, not really looking at him anymore. His pace quickens. Finally, he sees the end of the path as the vaguest hint of the rising sun casts light across the night sky. He steps through the tree line, and stops there. Open your eyes, Hinata. She does so, lids fluttering with the effort before she manages to obey. When her eyes take in the sight before her, she feels her breath taken from her lungs. It was Konoha, cast in the inky shadow of the night, with lights glimmering like 1,000 jewels from the distance. The sky, thrown into a soft shade of lavender by the approach of the sun, served as a backdrop to the scene, as the morning dew wrapped over the city like a veil of silver. You should see what you've been fighting for. He said softly, not looking down at her. How did you find this place? She was so cold, so very cold. The Sandime. He brought me here once. He answered. He told me that one should never lose sight of what they fight for. He paused, adding after a brief moment. He stood there, with the Hyuga matriarch in his arms, listening carefully to the sound of her slow heart. Naruto, she said, struggling to find the strength to speak. Promise me something. He didn't answer, but he was listening, she knew he was listening. Promise me, that you'll finish it. She said. Promise me that it'll mean something. That you'll achieve. I understand, he said softly, cradling her just a little tighter than before. I will succeed, Hinata. She smiled, a small, peaceful upturn of her lips as her body sagged against him. Your new world is one I would have liked to have seen. He took a breath, but did not answer as the new sun peeked its way over the horizon, an orange glow burning its way across the morning sky as he held the S-woman cradled against his sea. You should have, Hinata, out of everyone, you of all people, should have seen it. Naruto-sama. He sat at his desk, his head resting against his fist, its elbow on the armrest. He spoke without even looking up from whatever spot his eyes bored into the wooden furniture in front of him. Come in, Suzume. The door opened, and from the corner of his eye he caught the diminutive brunette walking into the room. Her usual mannerism was subdued. Her head was bowed slightly, her arms cradling many large, rolled-up papers as she shambled through his office door. His voice was so very soft, muted in what he nearly misjudged as fear, but he knew better. It wasn't fear echoing in her tone. It was something else, something he was thoroughly unused to being on the receiving end of. Empathy. Naruto-sama, here are the maps you requested of Suna. Thank you. He answered, making a vague gesture to the empty side of his desk with his free hand. Leave them there. He still hadn't pulled his eyes away from the spot in front of him. The crinkle of pages disrupted the silence for a few moments. He watched Suzume through his peripheral vision, but she was little more than background static, white noise, to him. When she's completed her task she straightened and he dismissed her as he always had. You may leave. However, she didn't not follow her usual pattern, not this time. She stayed, and shifted from one foot to another, nervous. And that was what drew his full attention to her. Naruto-sama, she said finally. On a more personal level, well, are you, all right, sir? He blinked, blue eyes staring at the woman in front of him, and she continued shuffling nervously in tense anticipation for his answer. After another, seemingly endless moment of his silence, she wondered why she'd said anything at all. If nothing else, Naruto was a private person who kept his affairs and thoughts strictly to himself. Maybe it had been too presumptuous of her to think that if he would talk to anyone right now it would have been her, but she had been concerned. He went off to fight a naval battle that was, by all accounts, a complete B on both sides. After that he'd ended up stranded on some island off of Kiri, then got K, and almost K, probably by some missing ninja, only to come back to having one of his oldest. In truth, she didn't even know what Hinata-sama had been to him. She assumed close friend, while some along the grapevine said that she'd been his lover. Regardless, he returned just in time to watch a person who was significant to him just as from poison. It had been perfectly reasonable for her to be worried, right? But still, maybe it hadn't been perfectly reasonable for her to voice that worry. Would he take it as an insult or something? Just as she was ready to give an apology of some sort, his voice reached her, wistful and melancholy. You almost sounded like her for a moment. Despite herself, Suzume balked, surprised that he had said such a thing. She half expected him to have simply told her to leave after she asked him if he was all right, but for him to actually answer her, and with a statement like that no less. He straightened in his seat, seemingly returning to himself, releasing a sigh through his nostrils as he reached for the first of the maps. He seemed to contemplate something for a moment before he finally spoke again. You may take the rest of the day off, Suzume. Wah. She found herself stuttering, the words tripping over themselves as they sought to get past her lips. I don't. You've done well enough handling affairs while I've been gone. Take the day off. She was unsure what had just happened right now, whether or not he was doing this out of a genuine wish to reward her hard work, or if he didn't want someone who knew him so close right now. But it gave her an odd feeling, like something just wasn't quite fitting well with him. It worried her, both for him and for the others around him. He was repressing his emotions, burying them so deep that once he was finished they would never again re-emerge. That was his desire. But the wound was raw, and it was still be. If anyone was going to reach him in some way, now would be the time, maybe the only time. But she knew that it would not be her who would reach it. It could not be her. She lowered her head slowly. Will I see you at the funeral tomorrow, Naruto-sama? You may leave Suzume. One scroll rested on his desk. A massive S of wood, scrawled together at the edges and rolled up, sat upon his desk, almost mocking in its simplistic appearance. His fingers drummed over the wooden surface of his desk, fingernails ticking against the smooth flat plane at regular intervals. The orderlies had been both confused, and more than a little startled at the state of his office. But a wall of sand to act as a proxy to seal up the openings of his little breakdown the previous night, and an order to have someone scheduled to come over during the weekend to fix it, and everyone had gone back to business as usual. Truth be told, half of him just wanted to throw the thing away, bury it somewhere so deep beneath the sands that it would take 10,000 years of geological evolution for it to even have half a prayer of resurfacing if it even survived that long. The other half knew his duty, and it knew that despite his seething anger of betrayal, and whatever his personal feelings for the man might be, Zhu Liang was not a man who would not have foreseen and prepared for the possibility of his death. And whether it was another lie or some genuinely necessary information to be imparted, he needed to read it regardless. Taking a deep breath, he steeled his resolve. Reaching forward, he grabbed hold of the thing that had all but plagued him since his short return. Pulling free the blue silk ribbon that had tied it shut, Gaara felt himself swallow once before he finally pulled the scroll open. The next thing he knew, his world went white. Ah, the sleeping beauty rejoins us. Akina woke to the sound of a chuckling, unfamiliar voice, and it took her a moment to realize where she was again before she remembered. For a moment she felt sad and lost, wondering just what the hell she was going to do now, where she would go. Then the moment passed and she made herself sit up inside the tent, fire once again crackling merrily in the center of it. Her, for lack of a better word, host, still sitting across from where she was, with more food held out over the flickering tongues of flame. So, the monster of Kiri continued after a few seconds. You got that answer for me, girl? You mean of what I want to do now? It was rhetorical, and she smiled bitterly as she reiterated his question, still staring down into the flames. I'm going to do the only thing I can do. I have to try and stop this. Ah, Kisum smiled, wagging his finger. That's what you can do, girl. I asked you what you wanted to do. What I want? For a second he could almost swear her voice cracked. What I want is an impossibility right now. So, I'll settle. He raised a non-existent eyebrow before he shrugged. Well then, why don't you share how you plan on doing that? The answer she gave was simple, and though he had already half expected it, it still made him smile with amusement when he heard it coming from her lips. I still have to defeat my brother. When he opened his eyes, he wasn't in his office anymore. He wasn't sure where he was really. He hadn't exactly visited many places in his life with waterfalls. He hadn't visited any for that matter. If that wasn't startling enough, not a grain of sand responded to the call of his will. These surroundings, he found his heart leaping into his tea before he turned around, eyes wide as he found himself gazing on a face that should not be there, with a voice he should not be hearing. Were my choice Kazekage Dono, I do hope that they do not make you feel too out of place. He sucked in a sharp breath. Zhu Liang. Now that's a pipe dream if I'd ever heard one, girl. Kisum answered. You're no closer to K, your brother, than I am to sprouting wings and flying. I never said K. She answered, unfazed by his mocking. I said defeat. Even less. He guffawed. You can get lucky with a K shot. A kunai you threw when he was distracted fighting someone else. A jutsu you just so happened to counter with what was just right at the time. It takes a lot more skill to beat someone than it takes to K them. I have to try. She continued. It's different this time. Why? Because, she paused, thinking for a moment why she was answering him in the first place. Her hesitation lasted but a mere moment before she decided to do so anyway, if not for anything else then just to hear herself say it aloud. When all this started, after Naruto took over Konoha and all I wanted to do back then, all I thought of was fighting and K him. It took me over almost. I know now that, some of it was Zhu Liang's influence but, a lot of it, most of it had been from me. And then, the fish man probed after a lengthy pause, turning the meat over the fire. Then I found out who exactly he was. You know, my brother. And I just wanted then to get away from it all. To get away from Zhu Liang, from Tsunade, Yugito, Naruto, everyone and everything I'd ever known. I just wanted to get away from all of it. Get my head clear. So you went to Suna. Though, somewhat interested in her past, he could fill in the blanks easily enough from the names she was throwing down. Yes, I went to Suna. And there, a sigh escaped her lips. There I was able to get away for a while. The war wasn't nearly as close to home there as it was in Kumo. And it was starting to get good, you know, starting to feel like home. So, I fought for them, in a way I guess I still am. Then again, what's changed? What are you fighting for now? After a lengthy pause she replied evenly. When I fought him during the battle at sea. I confronted him. I said he was scared of bringing peace, of stopping the fighting. Kisum smiled. Then here, when I spoke to him after we rescued him from you. She gestured vaguely in his direction. When I asked him again, to just bring it to an end, to stop the fighting. He told me that he couldn't. That his freedom was forfeit long ago. That smile just got a little bit wider. And what does that tell you? It tells me, that he's got no choice. He's trapped, she answered finally. More trapped than anything or anyone else I've ever seen. He doesn't want to stop fighting because it's the only thing he really knows how to do, and even if he wanted to stop he can't, because something is keeping him on that course. So how will beating him change anything then? Because, if I beat him, if I stop him, I might be able to show him that there is an alternative, I can make him see that this isn't necessary. Maybe if I beat him, I can get him to listen. Or you'll just increase his determination to KU. Maybe so, but I have to try something. You'll try and you'll s. He laughed. It's always a possibility. Ain't no simple possibility, girl. It's what's gonna happen. Why are you so sure? Because, he answered. He ain't like you, girl. He ain't like your little Kazekage. Hell, he ain't even like me. You mean strength-wise? No, I mean in everything. You. He snarled through his teeth, advancing on Kumo's previous cage with ill intent. You miserable lying, he found his fist passed straight through empty air, with the Raikage's body dispersing into tendrils of white smoke before reforming. Despite appearances, Gaara, this construct is formed of little more than chakra and my own will. How exactly does one punch a thought? I'd do a lot worse than that if I could get my hands on you right now. I see that, I did not s with you on the best of terms. You know what you did. No, quite frankly I don't. He drawled, his tone much too bored for the Jinchuriki's liking. I created this construct shortly after we arrived in Suna after the sea battle. Whatever has happened in the days or months since then, I would not know. You used me. For the first time since he could remember, Gaara actually wanted his sand at his side, wanted it to crush the person in front of him just for the sheer pleasure it would bring to see him suffer at least once. He didn't like that part of him, but only now as he stood face to face with his betrayer did the full magnitude of the treachery truly hit him. Its full, unbearable weight and all its consequences sunk in slowly, crawling over his mind like the slime of an amoeba. You used me, Kankuro, and Temari to drag my people into a war we didn't have to enter. Either then or a year later the war would have still touched your people, Gaara. He said neutrally. You cannot shield them from it with a mere wall of sand. We didn't have to fight. We could have negotiated, spoken. It would have made no difference. So many people s on your presumption. He roared. You arrogant bastard. Despite himself, he tried to lash out again, even while knowing it would not work. As expected, Zhu Liang's spectral image vanished in smoke, before reforming again. It is no presumption. It is fact. Uzumaki Naruto will never accept a surrender. Especially not your surrender. Why is that? Kisum chuckled. Because girl, he is a shinobi. He is what you, that Kazekage and all your little friends have been playing at for years. You keep saying we play at ninja. You've been saying it since I met you even. Why? Because you don't know what it is. Not really. You just fight, you K and you defend others. You're a soldier. You haven't stayed under deep cover for years, decades even, before given the confirmation order and then turning right around and gutting the people you've called friends for the last 4 years. You haven't needed to make sure a certain family is eliminated from the eldest wiseman down to the minute-old newborn. You haven't been thrown to the wolves that are your hunters so your country can avoid a war. You've never been. He paused, almost searching for the word before he found it, his smile growing a little again. Expendable. Your brother has done, still does things. But he was expendable once. So was I, so were all those guys back at Akatsuki. Don't presume to tell me what I have or have not been in my life. She bit back, memories of Zhuge Liang, Sunad and Shizun creeping back through her skull. Fair enough. He shrugged. Point still stands. He's in a whole nother league. You were trained to fight. For you, it's a skill you've acquired in your life. You can pick it up and drop it whenever you feel it's time to do so. For me, it's a part of my life. I've lived on the battlefield and will on it. For him though, his life has been spent tirelessly in perfecting the art of other beings. Everything else he knows is a skill he's acquired around that, and for that, I still need to try. Nah, let's be clear. The shark man hissed as he wagged his finger. You're heading down this road for one reason and one reason only. War will come here. The last Raikage's voice held firm, unyielding conviction and confidence, his cold black eyes staring into Gaara's green with unnerving certainty. I have no reason to trust you, nor hear you. Let me out of this place now. Not until you've listened to what I have to say to you, Gaara. The sleeping dragon retorted as calm as ever in light of the younger man's anger and impatience. I control this construct. It was designed so that after the first minor burst that would bring you here, your chakra would be absorbed by the scroll's seals. So in essence, your chakra fuels my illusion. It will last as long as you do. Glaring now at the Kazekage, who glared right back, he added. And I assure you, we will be here a very long time indeed with your reserves. The words were bit out through grit teeth. Say what you have to say. And let me out of this place. Liang took a breath, almost as a parent looking down on an impatient, disobedient child before he decided to speak. I told you once before that Naruto will grow to fear you. That he would fear what I would become. In point of fact, what you already are. A leader. He is a leader too, so were you. What does that? No, you are a leader. He is a ruler, a commander. As was I. You inspire your men. The shinobi of Suna would fight for you because they want to. Not because they have to, rather each and every one of them wants to. I saw it at Kumo clear as day. Not one of your men hesitated to enter a city which was not their own, exhausted, tired and weary, to save people they'd never met before. Simply because you asked it of them. It's not a lot of people that can inspire such dedication and loyalty in their men. Their loyalty will not shield them from him. Or an army that by all estimates is triple the size of ours. They need not be shielded. They need to be set loose. You would have me set my people on a course that will almost certainly end with thousands of them. They would fighting to save themselves from a lifetime of having the threat of death looming over their heads, much closer than this war would ever bring it. I'll take my chances before I choose to trust you again. What do I have to gain by tricking you now? He said with a shrug of his shoulders. This construct, and thus, the last of what I am, will cease to exist the moment I release you from this illusion. Whatever end you believe I may have in mind, I will not be here to see it bear fruit. Then why leave this at all then? Contrary to what you have grown to believe apparently, Kazekage, I do care for my people and what will happen to them now. It's why I left them in your care. You are the one leader that can show both the temperance to win their hearts, and the strength to keep the peace in his lands. He paused, seeming to think for a moment before he sighed, as though resigned. I left this here to offer you one last piece of advice. He paused. You may no longer trust me, Gaara. But it matters little. Trust that he will come with the intent to fight. There will be no surrender. You and Akina must prepare the people for what is to come. Akina is gone. For the first time the man seemed surprised, his unflappable countenance falling for a moment. Gone. I sent her away when I discovered that she was. He trailed off, a lingering regret creeping through the back of his mind, second-guessing his decision before he could stop himself. I see. That's all you can say. His ire for the man he'd helped and known for the last several months resurfaced. It was hard to think that this was the same person he'd risked his own life to try to save and help. Is that really all you can say? The question was repeated, more to verify that it needed asking rather than expecting a true answer. It is inconsequential that you have sent her away at this point. She will find her way back here. And she will be prepared for it. I told her that my captains would attack her on sight. She won't come here. She will, he answered, waving a hand dismissively. And she will be prepared to fight against him at your side. You're not always right. You're right, he acknowledged. However, you're heading down this path because you think it's what you still have to do. He chuckled, mocking. We all know what's coming, don't pretend that you don't. The last big one, and anyone that has something to lose, or something to gain, is heading straight for it. Then there are people like you and me. And what are people like you and me? She crossed her arms, almost offended at the insinuation that she had anything in common with the Mass M. The former Akatsuki smiled, chuckling as he spread his arms wide, leaning back. We're the people who can't step away even if we wanted to. We're the ones that have got to be there. Be it because of a sense of duty, like you, or just for the hell of it like me. For whatever reason, we need to see this through. So you're saying that, no matter what, you're fighting that fight. Then why'd you ask me what I wanted then, if it's so irrelevant? The fish man smiled. Because girl, it's the people that are fighting for something that are gonna survive that fight. People with purpose. I wanted to see if you would be one of them. What would be your purpose then? Pulling the meat free of the flames with a roaring laugh, the monster from Kiri's smile was wider than ever. When did I say I had one? That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.